Meeting of the Planning Committee, which is again a hybrid meeting. So there are colleagues here in the room. There are also colleagues who have dialed in and are with us on the internet. I'm going to, we should also say, I think that this is being a recorded meeting. So for those of us who are here participating, mind your language. Otherwise, do be aware that this is being recorded. I'm going to take the agenda as printed. So my first item is item 1, apologies. And are there any apologies this evening? I know of none personally. I don't know if anyone else knows of any. In that case, I take that as the fact that there are no apologies. And let's move on to item 2, declarations of interest on agenda items this evening. Does any member wish to make such a declaration? And again, I'm hearing nothing, I'm seeing nothing on my screen, so I'm assuming that there are no such declarations. And we can move to item 3 of our agenda, which is the minutes of previous meetings. And again, I'd just like to ask now whether any member has any comments on those, whether they feel that they are indeed a true record of our previous proceedings.
Agreed, Chair.
And I'm going to take that by acclamation, looking around the room, looking at the screen. I see no protest there, so I'm going to take those minutes as a correct record. That brings us to item 4, our first substantive item this evening, which is an application for major development, land off Cross Street, Chesterton. And on this item, we do have a public speaker, Mr. Gray. Before I ask Mr. Gray to speak, I'll draw members' attention to the supplementary and indeed the second supplementary report for the Planning Committee, which contains a revised recommendation, which is the one we'll be dealing with this evening. And I also want to ask our officer whether there is anything else to add before I invite Mr. Gray to speak to us.
No, there's nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay. I'm hoping Mr. Gray is with us in our waiting room.
Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
Just got to declare an interest that I'm a member of the Aspire board and won't be taking part in this debate.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Could I just ask, is Mr. Gray with us?
Yeah, I'm here, Chair. Can you hear me?
Okay, that's excellent. So before I ask you to speak, Mr. Gray, I'm just going to run through the rules for public speaking, which are that you have 5 minutes to address the committee. They'll be timed by our clerk, Mr. Durham, and he will give you a 1-minute warning when 4 of those minutes have elapsed so that you don't feel like you've missed anything in your presentation. Those 5 minutes will be the sum total of your contribution to the proceedings this evening. And on those conditions, I now invite you to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair and members. My name's Dan Gray. I'm Executive Property Director at Aspire Housing. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you on what's a very important planning application, both for the community of Chesterton and for Aspire Housing as the applicant. You may already know that Aspire is deeply rooted within the borough as landlord of over 8,000 homes and with 20,000 customers. We've got a strong track record of investing over the long term in the regeneration of neighbourhoods where the market's unviable for private sector involvement. And it's on that basis that we're very pleased to bring forward proposals for the regeneration of the Cross Street area of Chesterton. The plans before you today have been the best part of 4 years in the making and have been shaped through extensive engagement with the local community, your officers, elected members, and other key stakeholders. Our vision for the Cross Street Master Plan is to shape a new development of 125 homes in the heart of Chesterton, built around a new older person's village with 90 purpose-built apartments and bungalows for rent, and a separate development of 35 family homes for open market sale. These homes will transform the housing offer and pathway within this neighbourhood for generations to come. The 78 existing homes to be redeveloped are, for the most part, no longer fit for their purpose and don't make a positive contribution to the long-term future of this neighbourhood. Many of the existing residents have already been fully supported throughout the process of moving to replacement homes in areas of their choice, and a number of residents will move to new homes in the first phase of this scheme. We estimate that this master plan will cost nearly £20 million and take 4 to 5 years to deliver in its entirety, reflecting our patient approach to community investment. Aspire has undertaken a comprehensive community engagement programme in preparing this master plan. This included 4 public consultation events over the last 2.5 years, which sought to engage as many local people as possible, including our existing customers, community stakeholders, local ward councillors and occupiers of neighbouring properties. Crucially, it's meant that the local community has been consulted on and contributed to all the stages of designing this scheme. The design and technical elements of the proposals have also been the subject of thorough and constructive pre-application discussions with officers and elected members. We initially presented draft proposals to officers in September 2019 and to representatives of the Council's Strategic Planning Consultative Group on 2 separate occasions, firstly in October 2019 and more recently in January of this year. In addition, the scheme has been the subject of an independent design review at the pre-app stage by Urban Vision North Staffordshire. All of this engagement has been very valuable in helping us identify the key issues and concerns amongst the local community and the technical and design related issues that we need to address in preparing our proposals for the site. As a result, we believe that the finished proposals provide a comprehensive, well-designed regeneration master plan that's appropriate in context and will result in an attractive, desirable and sustainable place. A place of choice and a place that makes a positive contribution to the lives of Chesterton residents. Since submitting the application in May this year, we've worked extensively with your officers and consultees to address relevant technical issues that have arisen out of the public consultation. Members will note that no technical consultees have objected to the grant of planning permission. We do understand the concerns that have been expressed by the Council's landscape officer and some local residents in relation to the loss of visually significant trees in phase 1 of the development. This is the land off Gibson Grove. While we accept that these selected tree removals would give rise to some modest adverse impacts, these regrettably can't be avoided, and it will be very hard to conclude that this would significantly outweigh the benefits of the proposals, which include, amongst other things, the revitalisation of an area that deserves investment and the delivery of much needed housing for older people and families. We believe that these proposals constitute a high quality development in a sustainable settlement. Moreover, the application is compliant in national planning policy terms and satisfies local plan policies. I ask tonight that you support our vision for the regeneration of the Cross Street area of Chesterton.
1 minute.
And planning permission for this ambitious redevelopment scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. I now, before I open the item for debate, want to ask our officer if there's anything that should be commented on at this moment.
Not at this stage, thank you.
In that case, I open the item for debate. Councillor Owen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm the ward member for Holditch and Chesterton, where this site is proposed. Okay, I've got two major concerns about phase 1. The removal of the mature trees being one. That's mentioned numerous times on the report. And the width of the highway in Gibson Grove. I've been on the site this afternoon to have a further look. Gibson Grove does need widening to twice its current size, in my estimation. And what are the implications of removing the mature trees? There's 11 in total, I believe. And whereas I do appreciate, future landscaping will be very good, what are we going to do in the meantime regarding these trees?
Thank you very much, Councillor. I don't know if our officer wishes to comment on the questions raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. it may be appropriate to, at this stage, to share the plan of Gibson, of phase 1, which is the development at adjoining Gibson Grove. So during the course of the application, we did receive an objection from the Highway Authority about the inadequacies of the width of Gibson Grove and the consequences that would have in terms of loss of on-street parking. So there are vehicles parked regularly on Gibson Grove adjoining the properties, the existing properties on there that will be retained. The amendments have involved the widening of the Gibson Grove, the retention of on-street parking, so the remaining width is adequate for 2 vehicles to pass. And more recently, they have introduced a service strip along the side of Gibson Grove where the development is taking place to ensure that all services are suitably accessible. So there is a footpath down one side of Gibson Grove and a service strip down the other. At the moment, there's a footpath down either side. The Highway Authority have commented on the revised plans and have concluded that it's acceptable now. They've withdrawn their objection. They consider this is sufficient to address the concerns that they had about the impact on the development and the consequent loss of or restrictions in terms of on-street parking for existing residents, and are satisfied that an adequate width of carriageway is provided. So there's no technical objections from a highway safety point of view. So dealing with the second concern raised, there is highway support for the proposal. In terms of the impact on the development on the appearance of the site, there's no doubt that there will be a large number, I think it's 14 in total, of trees removed to accommodate this development. At the moment, there is a block of flats at the southern end, which you might just about see on the, I'll enlarge that so you can see it a little more clearly. So the greenish shaded, yellow shaded area of the site is the part we're looking at. So there's a block of flats at the moment there, and the remaining site is largely green, and there is a group of trees in the area where my cursor is showing, and most of those trees will be removed to accommodate the development. So there's no doubt that it will result in a change in the character of this part of the wider site. There are 2 trees retained amongst the group at that end of the site, and there is a strip of landscaping where further tree planting could take place. A tree at the southern end of the site is also retained. So the vast majority of trees are removed. So there's no doubt you go from a largely open site to one that is largely built upon. But as set out within the report, a balancing exercise has been undertaken, and it has been concluded that the benefits of the scheme in terms of the provision of additional residential units outweigh the harm arising from the loss of trees. Thank you.
Don't know if you wish to come back on that, Councillor. Is that okay? In that case, Councillor Holland, I think, then Councillor Reddish.
Thank you, Chair. This represents, I think, a major investment by the borough's principal provider of social housing. I think we need housing in the borough. Aspire need to regenerate the housing stock that they have, and on that basis, I am minded to be supportive, very supportive in principle of what is a very complex application, but a necessary one for this part of the borough. I think in terms of the objections that have been raised, in terms of the widening, is it possible for us to see a photograph of Gibson Grove and to look in more detail as to what is proposed for there? Because that is a perfectly reasonable concern that's been raised by the ward member for the ward. In terms of the trees, I guess I know the answer to this, but is it possible for us to place a requirement upon the applicant to replace trees that are being lost in a particular way? It's not possible to replace a mature tree, particularly a mature tree of high quality like the ones that are being proposed to remove. But is there anything that we can do to condition or to place an obligation on the developer such that the number of trees in our borough does not diminish by process of this application? And lastly, in terms of the privacy objection that a resident or an objector to the scheme had made, is there any more information we can see about the part of this development, the phase one of it at least, that's the full application, that may raise privacy concerns? And can we take a look at the space between the dwellings and the overlooking, I think, if that would be possible, as a request to our officers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Again, I'd pass that over to our officers to deal with.
Okay, so this is a view of Gibson Grove. So this was taken this morning. So this is during the working day, and you can see there are a number of vehicles parked along there. It's a carriageway that is of a suitable width for two vehicles to cross, but because there's parked cars down one side, it's a single carriageway, and the proposal is to widen Gibson Grove to create a wider route along it. So that's there are a number of photos of this phase of the development, so I'll try and find one. So that's looking in the other direction. From the turning head at the end of Gibson Grove, and yeah, that's the nearest property on Sunningdale Grove, I think it is. So there are a number of side-facing windows on that property, and the development does come closer, but it is single-story, and I'll go back to the layout plan. If you bear with me. Oops, too far back. So there we go. So that's the property that you saw in the photograph, number 17 Sunningdale Grove. So the nearest properties are quite distant, certainly in excess of the space-bound dwelling standards. There is a car parking area that's situated to the side of that property, side and front of that property. So it is referred to within the report that there will be some activity within that parking area that will have an impact on the living conditions of the occupants of that property, but not to the extent where it is unacceptable. So there are no side-facing windows in any of the properties. These are single-story properties, and the separation distances and the orientations of the properties are such that there should be no adverse impact arising from this development in terms of loss of privacy. It is acceptable in terms of its impact on the living conditions of the existing residents on Sunningdale Grove and on Gibson Grove. Thank you.
You're happy with that, Councillor?
Thanks very much to the officer for that reply. I'd be interested in knowing a little bit more about the boundary treatment at that edge, particularly around the parking area there, where we can see that there will be activity right at the foot of Sunningdale, close to one property in particular, but I suppose of interest and concern to the other residents there as well.
I've brought up a plan showing the hard, well, it shows the soft and the hard landscaping. So there is a hedgerow proposed along there. I think the existing boundary treatments are retained, but that's supplemented by hedge planting on the development side of the site. and I'm just trying to spot the what that is. Certainly, yeah, it's not clear on the plan. We have got a condition, I believe, or we certainly could include it. Yes, condition 6 in the recommendation requires that the boundary treatments are in accordance with the approved plans, but we can seek to ensure that an appropriate boundary treatment is secured there. So yeah, so that red line is timber fencing, 1.8 metre high. I'm not quite sure what that bluish line is around there, but certainly there is a 1.8 metre high fence along the entirety of that boundary.
If the councillor's happy with that, we can move on to Councillor Reddish, and then we've got several members who are wanting to speak remotely as well. Councillor Reddish.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with the two previous speakers. I'm in favour of this application, but I am concerned about the lack of trees or the trees coming down. And I'd certainly want to say that whilst we can't do exactly like for like because of the maturity of the trees, that if 14 come down, then 14 go up of a similar type. So that would be one condition that I felt very strongly about. I also note that the police crime officer is actually suggesting that we go for gating for security reasons. I can't see that in the conditions. I've read them a couple of times. So I think it would be wise to include that as a condition. And I suppose once bitten, twice shy. I think on large developers, there needs to be a condition about lorries being wheel washed. So I would want to add that as well. Again, I can't see that in the condition. So I'd like to add one about wheel tyre washing, one about gating, and to make absolutely sure that it is, if 14 comes down, 14 goes up. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. I think I'm right, Mrs. Moulton, that the plans as they stand do show gating on the site. The question, I suppose, is whether we want to make sure that they're there via condition, therefore that can't be changed.
Yes, certainly the plans do show that this is a secure development. This is the communal area is secured, and yeah, we can impose a condition to require the retention of those if members consider that's appropriate. We can specify within the conditions a number of trees to be replaced, and we certainly would expect to see the same number, if not more, trees replaced. In terms of whether they're replaced on a like-for-like basis in terms of species, the landscape strategy that's been submitted seeks to argue that there needs to be an increase in the diversity of the species, some improvement, because there are a large number of sycamores, and they're proposing to give a bit more of a diverse species range. So I think it would be appropriate to ensure that we get the right number of trees, but maybe not so appropriate to say that we replace them with the same species if something appropriate to the location, which would increase the diversity and have a positive impact on the visual appearance of the area, can be secured. In terms of the size of the trees, I think we would definitely wish to ensure that they're semi-mature or mature, that are put back in place where it's appropriate to do so. Obviously, we would seek the advice of our landscape development section on the appropriateness of the species and on the size of the trees that are to be planted, and that would all be covered by condition. In terms of the wheel wash, it's not referred to specifically within the conditions, but that is something that would be covered in the environmental and traffic management plan. That covers wheel wash facilities or something similar to ensure that there's no debris spread onto the highway, and covers all other controls that we and measures that we wish to ensure are in place to minimise the impact during the construction phase of the development. So be assured that that will be in the condition as worded, and yeah, this is what it's one of the measures that's referred to in that plan, which is condition 3 within the revised recommendation.
So I think I hope the council will agree that this is an opportunity to improve the tree stock in some ways, to produce some native species trees as opposed to sycamores if we can. I certainly think we should embed in the condition an equal number of trees. And I also think the councillor is quite right that we should have these as semi-mature trees. I don't think saplings is a good idea in this area. So let's bear that one in mind, and we'll go ahead. We've got several councillors who wish to contribute from outside this building. And I'm going to call Councillor Jones first because he's had his hand up for a very long time, but you'll need to unmute yourself, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I share the concern of the ward member and Councillor Holland on Gibson Grove and the enlarging or widening of the road there. I'm just looking at the site plans, and I just wondered if the planning officer can confirm a few things for me. Looking at the plans, it looks like with the widening of Gibson Grove and the addition of parking bays, that the carriageway on Gibson Grove will be 5 metres in diameter. That's the first thing that I was hoping the planning officer could confirm for me. And then secondly, is that what we would deem sufficient width for a 2-lane highway rather than a 1-lane highway? If the planning officer can also confirm that for me.
Yes, the carriageway width is 5 metres. I'm not, let me share the plan that I can see on my screen, but you can't. Bear with me. So yes, it's 5 metres between the parking bays and the edge of the development where the service strip will be, and the service strip is an additional 1 metre width. So given the nature of the road and the speeds that the vehicles will be travelling along, which will be very slow, that is a sufficient width for 2 vehicles to pass, and it is appropriate, and the Highway Authority has satisfied that that is a sufficient width to be safe.
Thank you.
If that completes your questions, Councillor Jones, I'm going to move to Councillor Maxfield, who's also had a hand up for some time. So Councillor Maxfield, again, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Go. Fear of repeating what everyone else has actually said in the room. You know, I do agree with the investments needed. This redevelopment of the Bristol Street motor seems to have like bounced back and forth in various guises. I think we're at a position where I think we need to actually progress forward with it. But with regards to, again, with the trees, I'm thinking back to an application which I'm sure many members will remember for development that was in Madeley, which was similar with removing some significant trees, and the developer was going to put some trees or shrubs down. And I'm just wondering, with the condition of the landscaping, if we can actually sort of stipulate the height or a minimum height. Obviously we can't go and stick massive 20, 30, 40 year trees in there, but certainly if we can have a substantial, so the view, if you like, it can be returned or recovered quicker than just if they're simply saplings that are put in. That was all I was going to say. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, I don't know if our officer wishes to comment. I mean, I'm not sure about height. I mean, maturity, I think we can certainly condition, but our officer may put me right.
Well, my understanding is, yeah, that if you go for a semi-mature tree, it all depends on the species as to what height that particular tree would be. So to specify a height might be overly restrictive and may limit the choice. of trees that we could secure. So yeah, I think, and I'm looking to my colleague in landscape development section to see if she disagrees with me. I think if we specify semi-mature trees, then we will get a tree of an appropriate size. It won't be a sapling, and dependent on this species, it could be quite a substantial tree in its initial height, and certainly will grow bigger.
Again, if I don't see the councillor wishing to add to that, so if that's correct, I'll pass on to Councillor John Williams, who's also indicated he wants to speak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll say I welcome this development, and I'd like to move the recommendation. I think the houses or the flats that are going to be demolished, they passed the sell-by date, that they've worked well for the residents of the borough over the years, but I'm afraid they're out of the modern living standards, in my view. And I know people who live in them, I know this area quite well. A lot of damp. No matter what they do, Spire have done quite a lot of work, but they're concrete ceilings and concrete floors, and the damp in there is quite horrendous. So I welcome this, and the development, as Mr. Gray has said, is really welcome, I'm sure, by us all and people of Chesterton. I just want to move on. Firstly, Madam Reddish, Councillor Reddish has brought up the alleyways. All alleyways should be gated. That we should, without any, that should be in the recommendation. And coming to the trees, well, I agree, everybody could have trees, but trees grow and grow and grow. And we've had this, I don't know how the councillors have had more reports of trees overgrowing, and on top of that, they grow every year. And the council, again, has a job to go around and do the work on their property. And Aspire, I'm afraid, you know, they're not doing their bit in cutting back trees, pruning them to a reasonable level. So I wouldn't like trees put into this, the amount of trees put back into this site that are going to crowd the residents. That might sound a little bit out of the way in the sense where we do need trees, but people need to live and people need to be in the gardens with the sun when that's about, instead of a tree that's grown and grown and grown and will not be cut back. So we used to one time say that if you couldn't get the trees back into that particular development, the developer would pay for trees to be put into another area, not a million miles away from this development. So I leave it to the landscape people to keep this in mind, and also the mind that bushes, little bushes that you put in 5 years down the road, they're enormous, and also the trees as well. So I think planting has got to be, in my view, landscaping has got to change considerably, whereas we've got to have the trees and the bushes and that for the eco, but also for people to be able to live around those particular elements of the landscaping. So I'd just like to put a recommendation that if they can't get them on the site, the amount of trees, leave it to the landscape department, that the trees are the amount of trees are planted within a certain area, not far from this development. But I'd like to move the development, thank you. Move the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see any further contribution from members who are dialing into this meeting. If anyone who does wish to make a further contribution, Councillor Burgess, I think, but you'll need to unmute yourself, Councillor Burgess.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I am in favour of this application, but what concerns me is we seem to be losing a lot of greenery, particularly in these trying times. And the trees, there used to be trees called street trees, because I had 1 or 2 of those put up in my ward in Kidsgrove, and they don't grow very quickly. And I think that would be a good idea if you were going to plant trees, to have those put in the site or near to the site, so at least people can look out and see some greenery. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further? Councillor Moffat.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just to support comments that have been made about developing those flats into something feasible and enjoyable and appropriate, so that's all good. Councillor Grocott has said that he's echoed the concerns of other councillors regarding green, access to the green and the trees, but completely agree with what Councillor Williams is saying, really sometimes trees overwhelming people. There is some concern apparently about parking, which is always a concern when there's new developing, and also about refuge. So these are comments that are coming from residents in that area. And I would just like to express a little bit of concern, completely understand the idea of having like a gated community, but what would be great, and I don't know whether there's plans for this, but within that development to have activities which don't make the current resident feel as if they're being kind of blocked out with big fences kind of keeping them separate, but activities which actually bring the new community and the existing community together. Sorry, thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. My understanding is the gates are not particularly high in that sense. They simply delineate the edge of this so that, you know, if there is trouble, the police can say, why are you here, when there's manifestly a gate in the way and such like. But I don't think anyone envisages an area which is cut off, so to speak. I think I'll just look to our office to confirm that.
Yes, it's to ensure that the communal space is safe and secure, and it's not a totally gated community. So the occupants of the development will be part of the wider community in the area and will be able to use the facilities that are provided in a later phase of the development phase 4. So that which is why the developer ASPIRE wished to provide the accommodation that is provided on the phase 1 to part of the site, to ensure that this community, the existing community, is retained and it grows as a consequence of the additional accommodation that's provided. It's not going to result in residents occupying these units being isolated from the rest of the community because they're behind closed gates.
I think we can probably bring this one to a close. I don't see any councillors wishing to make further contributions. The recommendation has been proposed. I'm happy to second it from the chair. These are, of course, the recommendations on the second supplementary report. Please be aware of that. Added to those, I think we can say we expect a wheel washing provision to be in condition 3. That we would like for like planting of trees, but we will leave the specifics of that to our expert officers to look at. And that we do expect the gates on the plan to be embedded in the plan. With all of that in mind, I'm now going to take a vote via roll call. I'll start with colleagues in the room, and then I'll move to colleagues who are looking in remotely. So I'll ask you if you're in favour or against the recommendation. Councillor Owen.
I'm in favour.
Councillor Holland.
In favour.
Councillor Reddish.
In favour.
Councillor Cooper.
In favour.
Our colleagues who are there remotely. Councillor Jones.
In favour.
Councillor Burgess. You'll need to unmute yourself, Councillor.
Sorry, in favour.
Councillor Mrs. Williams.
In favour.
Councillor Williams.
In favour.
Councillor Northcott.
I'm abstaining, Chair, because I've declared an interest.
Councillor Moffat.
In favour.
Councillor Maxfield.
In favour.
Looking at my screen, that's everyone. In which case that recommendation is clearly passed. And I would just like to add at this juncture my thanks to Aspire Housing for their liaison with the council prior to this meeting this evening. We can then move on to our next item, item 5, where once again we have a speaker to address us. I just ask if that speaker can be brought into the room.
Chair, can I just declare an interest in this item as well, please?
Thank you very much, Councillor. So do we have Mrs. Mithin with us?
Yes.
Excellent. So again, because it's sometimes elapsed, I'll just run through the rules for public speaking again. So you will have 5 minutes to address the committee. When 4 of those have elapsed, our clerk, Mr. Durham, will give you an oral warning to make sure that you can sum up in time, and that will be the sum total of your contribution to the proceedings this evening. So on those terms, I invite you to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for allowing me to speak on behalf of Aspire Housing in support of this application. We welcome the conclusion of the officer's report, which is to recommend that members grant planning permission for the proposals. In January of this year, the local planning authority granted Aspire Housing detailed planning permission to redevelop its ASHFIELDS Grange site at Hall Street on the edge of Newcastle-under-Lyme town centre to provide 89 supported living apartments. Since securing planning permission, Aspire, in conjunction with its design team, M&E consultants and contractor, has undertaken a review of the approved scheme. This exercise has identified a need for minor alterations to be made to the approved layout to accommodate the relocation of the bin compound that was approved as part of the original proposals, together with a small compound that would house a substation, an emergency generator, and a standalone gas kiosk. These are proposed to be located in the southeast corner of the site, within the car park area that sits between the site's lower street A34 frontage and the new apartment building. Prior to making this application, Aspire sought advice from your officers about whether the local planning authority could support the proposals in principle, and if they could, whether they were acceptable in design terms. Aspire were initially advised that it may wish to consider the possibility of relocating, repositioning, or looking to screen the compound in order to minimise its visual impacts in views from Lower Street A34. Our client has taken on board the advice it received from officers and has worked closely with its design team and technical experts to explore a variety of options for positioning the substation and generator closer to or behind the main building in order to address the comments received from your officers. However, Aspire's M&E consultant has advised that neither of these options would be feasible in this case for a whole host of technical reasons, and the location of the compound shown on the submitted drawings is the optimal location for from both an M&E and health and safety perspective. Nevertheless, Aspire is of the view that the visual impact of the substation and bin store compound can be mitigated by erecting timber fencing around the perimeter of the compound and through appropriate tree planting along the site's lower street boundary. These mitigation measures will provide appropriate screening, ensuring that the compound would not appear incongruous in its proposed location in views from within or outside the site. To illustrate this, our client has had its architects produce a series of visuals and photo montages which show what the compound could look like from a range of viewpoints, including the site entrance, building entrance, Nutton Lane to the southwest, and Lower Street to the southeast. Notwithstanding this, we understand that members have previously raised queries about the accuracy of the submitted visuals, particularly in respect of the drawing which shows how the compound would appear in views into the site from Lower Street. We would therefore like to take this opportunity to allay any fears members may have in this regard. Whilst the visuals submitted as part of the application are of course indicative only, we can confirm that they do indeed provide an accurate as possible representation of the appearance of the substation itself, including its colour, and how the proposed landscaping planting that will be introduced along the Lower Street site frontage would screen the proposed compound once it matures. Aspire's landscape architect is confident that the low planting would in reality be a little denser than that shown on the drawings, and that it would provide screening almost instantaneously. Whereas the trees are likely to take several years to reach the height depicted on the drawings, they are nevertheless expected to provide at least the level of cover shown on the drawings once they have sufficiently matured. As such, we are confident that the proposed scheme of landscaping for the site, and in particular the section along the A34, will provide an appropriate level of screening that would satisfactorily mitigate any perceived harm arising from the siting of the compounds in their proposed location. Moreover, members should take further comfort from the fact that the conditions imposed on the original planning permission for the Ashfields Grange scheme require Aspire to submit full and precise details of the landscaping proposals for the site to your officers for approval, and to carry out these conditions in development in accordance with the approved details and maintain the landscaping scheme in perpetuity. With this in mind, Aspire is therefore of the view the proposals will not give rise to any adverse impacts for the visual amenity of the area, and that they would therefore be in accordance with policy CSP1 of the core strategy and policy N17 of the local plan. Accordingly, we commend the officer's report to you and respectfully request that members resolve to grant planning permission for the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I open the item for debate, I'll just ask our officer if there's anything that ought to be raised at this juncture.
There's no comments that I wish to make, but obviously if members wish to see the visuals referred to, then that's something that we can display as necessary. Thank you.
I think perhaps it's, given that they've been mentioned in the presentation, it would be worthwhile if we just have a quick look at those. I'll just see if we can get on top of the technology. While that's happening, I would remind members that there is a supplementary report to this item. So the recommendation we'll be dealing with is the recommendation on the supplementary report, which I think is on page 35 of the final incarnation of the agenda for this evening. I think we now do have some visuals. If the screen fails, if members in the room can pay attention to the monitor screen on the far side of the room, I think that will be useful.
So members will see on the screen the submitted visuals that have been submitted. In particular, proposed view C, which is from Nutton Lane and the junction with the A34, I believe. Obviously, this seeks to demonstrate that there'll be, with the tree screening on that frontage and the density of that tree screening, majority of the bin store and substation with its associated enclosure would be screened from view. And also with the backdrop of the new building, I think your eye would be drawn to the new building, which we have obviously considered as an acceptable and high quality design. So the visuals are there to satisfy members that whilst the bin store and substation won't be completely hidden, views will be interrupted and substantial screening will be provided. Thank you.
So I'd now open the item for comment.
Just seeking clarification, really. I noticed from the supplementary that the Environment and Health Department were suggesting that we needed to put conditions to assess the noise and air quality of the generator. Has that actually been done? Are we going to do that?
Yes, there is a revised recommendation on the first supplementary report, which does advise those two conditions regarding noise and air quality. I'm still waiting for exact wording from Environmental Health, but obviously the principle of those two conditions being added is what members need to obviously vote on tonight.
Thank you.
I can see no further. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Councillor Holland, no?
Move the recommendation as revised, Chair.
Again, I'm happy to second that from the chair. And again, I'll take the vote by roll call, beginning with our colleagues in the room. Councillor Owen. Councillor Holland.
In favour.
Councillor Reddish.
In favour.
Councillor Cooper.
In favour.
Councillor Jones.
In favour.
Councillor Burgess.
In favour.
Councillor Mrs Williams.
In favour.
Councillor Williams.
Permit.
Councillor Northcote.
As before, Chair, I'm a SPI board member with a pecuniary interest, therefore I'll be abstaining on this item.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Moffat.
Permit.
Councillor Maxfield.
In favour.
Again, I think then that item clearly passes. And once again, I would like to thank Aspire for the degree of liaison we've had prior to the beginning of this development, which I think has proved very healthy. We can now move on to item 6 of our agenda, 1 London Road. London Road, as you can see, it's an application for variation. Again, I'll just ask our officer if there's anything we need to know before we open the item for debate.
Nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So you see the recommendation in front of you, and I invite comment from members. Councillor Reddish.
I'd just like to move permit.
Again, for the purposes of voting, I'm happy to second that from the chair. And again, I will take the vote via roll call. So, Councillor Owen.
In favour.
Councillor Holland.
In favour.
Councillor Reddish.
Permit.
Councillor Cooper.
In favour.
And then outside the room, Councillor Jones.
Permit.
Councillor Burgess.
In favour.
Councillor Mrs Williams.
Permit.
Councillor Williams.
Permit.
Councillor Northcote.
In favour, permit.
Councillor Moffat.
In favour.
Councillor Maxfield.
In favour.
That item therefore clearly passes, and we can proceed to item 7 of our agenda. And again, I draw members' attention to the fact there is a supplementary report to this item and therefore a revised recommendation to be found. Before going ahead, though, once again, we have a speaker on this item, Mr. Melville. Is Mr. Melville in the room with us?
Chair, I can't see him, but he's showing, but it looks like he's on mute.
Could I ask Mr. Melville if you are there? If you
can you hear me now?
I can indeed, yes.
Super,
so,
thank you. Sorry about that.
Once again, just briefly, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. That's the sum total of your contribution to the debate this evening. After 4 of those 5 minutes have elapsed, you'll be given an oral warning by our clerk, Mr. Durham, to make sure you don't miss anything in your summing up. And on those terms, I invite you to address the committee.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm the applicant Duncan Melville, Director of Primus Property Group. Thank you for letting me speak today. By way of background, our application for the Met was approved in March 2019, with the scheme now completed and residents moving in. The development contains 211 rooms of student accommodation. Its occupation is restricted by Condition 9 to solely students, and it's that condition that we're hoping to vary for a short period by the application that's before you today. I think it's fair to say that none of us could possibly have predicted what's occurred over the last few months. Identifying and implementing the right strategy has been challenging, whether it be from the highest national government level to our own individual households. Indeed, we are still trying to determine the best way to resolve competing interests, economic and health, and none of us know for how long this will last for. We do, however, know it won't just go away like a miracle. From a business perspective, COVID-19 has had a catastrophic impact on the education sector. It has raised serious question marks about the running of courses and the need and purpose for students to physically attend their place of study and in turn require accommodation. It also little short of decimated the number of foreign students, which is one of the markets that our product is tailored towards. This has been compounded by the closure of visa offices in the Far East and India, so even if they want to come, they can't. And then there have also been recession worries, the UK's relatively high infection rate, continued uncertainties in global travel, and the very real risk of a second wave, which now appears to be hitting us. At this stage in the academic year, we would expect to be 100% occupied. We are in fact just over half of that. That equates to over 100 empty rooms in a brand new flagship town centre development. The position is exacerbated by the fact that we're getting students withdrawing at almost the same rate as new tenancies. In terms of our specific product, although we cater for students, we don't cram them into cluster type accommodation that tend to be associated with first year students, which function effectively like glorified HMOs. In that type of accommodation, each student effectively lives in its own small room where they have a share and communal areas. Instead, our product is different. It is a studio-only scheme with their own shower and kitchen. It is designed to appeal to both mature postgraduates, final year students, and the foreign student market, who generally favour their own quiet private space and facilities with a considerably better quality fit-out. There are no bars, cinema, or games rooms in the development, or the type of rowdy common areas that tend to appeal to the younger undergraduates who escape their parents' reigns for the first time. That said, and this is a happy coincidence, our accommodation also happens to be ideal for young professionals and key workers at a time we all rely on them even more than usual. Equally, it is well positioned to support those who do have to isolate in the current environment. The managing agents have a clear and tested strategy to support things like food deliveries, post, bin collections, laundry, etc. for those affected in quarantine. None of this has been intentional on our part, but as a business, we are now struggling in a very uncertain world, and we are trying to our utmost to find a positive and sustainable short-term outcome, which will see us through this horrible pandemic. The economic benefits should also support the town with increased spending and car parking receipts. It is for that reason that we're applying to be able to occupy the building by non-students for a limited period up to the 31st of July 2022 to correspond with the end of the next academic year. After that date, the condition will fall back to 100% student accommodation, which is precisely what we want. We understand there have been no formal objections to the application, but we have heard from Rachel that certain concerns have been raised. I hope I have answered the first of those. This is not a cunning plan to cheat the planning system, prizing non-students and avoid providing affordable housing. The fact of the matter is that all the accommodation is affordable, and this really was the last thing in the world we wished to do. Another concern I understand is about car parking. There is no parking as part of the development, but it is of course directly across the road from the council's owned Midway's space car park, which has 655 spaces. We have checked, and this has very significant spare capacity. Indeed, we have confirmation from the council that there is availability for at least 100 permits if those are required. I do hope I have addressed those concerns satisfactorily, and what I've said has been helpful. As I say, this is not a cynical ruse to cheat the system. It's absolutely the last thing we expected to do. But like everybody else, is struggling at these times and trying to do our best to make something positive happen. We want to avoid 100 brand new units of accommodation sat vacant for the next 2 years. That will do no party any good, and especially when we know there's a demand for it. I very much hope you'll support the short-term proposition, and thank you again for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. Again, before I open the item for debate, I'll ask our officer if there's anything that should be commented on at this point.
Not at this point.
Thank you very much. So I now call for comments from members. Could I ask a question of our officers as regards the end of these occupancies? And our recommendation is very firm about the end date being the 31st of July 2022. How can we make sure that that is the case? I'm worried about, or the potential, I'm worried about the potential for people to dispute that and such like. And do we need to put any checks in place to make sure that any appeals procedure, etc., will still lead to the end of those occupancies by that period of time?
Well, we have, following the publication of the main agenda reports, considered this further, and we, as you will see in the first supplementary report that was published earlier today, and that members in the room have a paper copy of, that we're seeking to ensure that the management of the tenancies are in accordance with the submission. The information provided seeks to tailor the length of the tenancies to ensure that they always end on before the end date of the 31st of July 2022. Members may wish to give a shorter period of time to enable or specify that the tenancies are for a shorter period of time to enable an appeal process to be gone through if that is challenged. But I'm not sure that would work. We could take enforcement action against against a breach of that condition, but you wouldn't normally factor in a time period within which you could deal with any appeals against that enforcement notice. So there is the potential that there would be some occupation of the accommodation beyond the 31st of July date 2022, but we are seeking to minimise the likelihood of that and consider that that can be done. I'm not sure that there's anything further to add, but if you've got any further comments, questions, hopefully I can answer them.
That's very clear, Mrs. Moulton. It's a somewhat depressing answer, but nonetheless, I think it's a useful one for members to have. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as members know, I'd lose no opportunity to explain how little I like the building that we're discussing again tonight, and the pleasure I had in voting against it at a previous opportunity when I had the opportunity to vote against it. I think we're also privileged to have the applicant with us electronically this evening, so he can listen to me rail against the building, which perhaps if it was only half as high, he would now have a full building. Unfortunately, we're in the situation that we are, and I suppose I do have sympathy for the applicant, and I'm minded, I think, to approve this application as is recommended on the basis that our choice is between a building that could well be left empty, rotting away like an eyesore on the edge of the conservation area, or a building that is in use with residents who are going to contribute, we hope, to the local economy. So all of the issues that I might previously have raised about car parking seem somewhat moot at the current point, and therefore I'd be minded to approve the application as is recommended to us by our officers. But I have no joy in discussing this building. It is an absolute eyesore and a blot on our landscape. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reddish.
Thank you. Yes, I have sympathy with the applicant. However, I'm not quite so sympathetic as Councillor Holland. I do have difficulty over this parking. And I hear that there's availability for 100 permits. That sways me slightly. However, I feel as though I've got some obligation to the residents of Newcastle, and we're doing a lot of work on town centre development, encouraging people into the town centre. And I am very concerned on the scenario of the Saturday morning where the people in the Met are having a lie-in, and good on them. But also there are people wanting those same spaces to do their Saturday morning shopping, their late night Christmas shopping, when again, the people will be coming into the Met, having worked very hard all day. And it doesn't quite run true with me that we should be accepting this. And for that reason, I will probably be voting against it. there really isn't any clear description of where they can park if they don't park in the Medway. It's an area that we all know very well. And I'm not quite sure where these cars are going to go if they don't go into the Medway. And if they go into the Medway, then in my opinion, we're using spaces that are very valuable for other projects.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, firstly, Mr. Chairman, electronic, can you see that they're put behind them? Or you, the visual hand? Can you see where they're put?
Okay. I think you need to unmute yourself, Councillor. There's a little bit of feedback in the room. I can now see your hand. You've got your little hand raised up electronically.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I do apologise. I didn't. I'm rubbing it away without unmuting. Thank you. Firstly, again, I think, you know, we live in extraordinary times, what we're going through. And I think to permit, I go for a permit because of the situation that we find ourselves. But if you could give me some leeway on this, I did mention when this application come to the planning committee, the front door on the high street across from the listed building, which is the Guildhall, and I asked for that to be revamped and in a suitable structure put in place there. And to add to
Councillor, if I may, I mean, this is not the application that's in front of us at the moment. I think we need to stick to the variation in occupancy.
Well, I'll speak to the officer about that another time then, Mr. Chairman. So yes, I'll go with permit. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
I find myself in the strange position of agreeing with absolutely everything Councillor Holland has said, which is good for us in many ways. I'm minded to permit. I have reservations different to Councillor Holland's reservations. My reservations are that there is going to be a mixed occupancy, certainly potentially this year, of students and non-students, and I don't see anything within the application, and I'm sure one of the officers will correct me if I'm wrong, for how that's going to be managed. You have possibly two different groups of individuals that, as we know from casework over the years, does know is mixed exceptionally well when you've got students in and out of the building and non-students in and out of the building. And I would have liked to have seen something more clear about how they're going to manage whether students are going to be maintained within certain floors of the building, whether the open rental part of this is going to be preserved to other parts of the building. Otherwise, I think we are potentially creating a scenario where there's an imbalance in the distribution of residents throughout the building, which is going to lead to complaints and issues. But I do agree with comments from other councillors that I'm sympathetic towards the developer and owner for this. And I am also sympathetic towards the potential increase in footfall in the town centre, which is needed more than ever at this moment in time. But I'm a little bit disappointed to see no mention of how two differing cohorts of residents will be appropriately managed within the building.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, I'd like to echo the comments that other councillors have made. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation as well. I think having people in the town centre is always going to be a good thing. It reduces antisocial behaviour. I understand Councillor Reddish's concerns re car parking, but I think some ideas were put forward about that. I absolutely agree with Councillor Jones's concerns about having mixed residents, if you like, and I think it's really important that when people are ready to occupy that space, that they completely understand who their neighbours are going to be. Otherwise, we're just creating an opportunity for people to fall out and actually to have lots of unhappy residents. And I am minded to permit, but I'm just wondering whether some of those kind of concerns can be taken on board and carefully managed for the benefit of local residents and also people living there.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Northcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Jones has taken away part of my question, really, in terms of how the cohort of students are going to be managed and kept separate. But that being said, we can't do that in the community. I, as well as Councillor Holland, didn't want to see the size of this building increase to the extent that it has originally. But that being said, we are in a crisis at the moment, and I think it would be highly reckless to oppose this purely on the basis of punitive actions. I think we should give a fair crack of the whip in terms of the developer on this, with the conditions that are set out in the report, to bring that much valued footfall and vibrancy and spending power into Newcastle, where it is so sorely needed at this time, more than any other time, I think, in living history. We do need that, and I hate to see a scheme fail or falter or fall into disrepair and be not viable at the centre. It is what it is. The planning permission was approved. We've got this building now for whatever purposes it's set out for. So I will be mindful to permit this with reservations in terms of the conditions of occupancy beyond the stated period. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further members who wish to comment before I proceed to a vote? I see none in the room. I don't see any hands raised on screen. In that case, I'm going to proceed to a vote. Again, I draw members' attention to the fact there is a supplementary report. The recommendations are those as printed with the supplementary report. Councillor Owen.
Permit.
Councillor Holland.
In favour.
Councillor Reddish.
Against.
Councillor Cooper.
In favour.
Councillor Jones. I think that was in favour, Councillor Jones. There was a lot of feedback there. Am I correct in saying that?
No, I'm against.
Against. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Burgess.
Permit.
Councillor Williams.
Unmute Williams.
Permit.
Again, there's an awful lot of feedback out there. I think Councillor Mrs. Williams, you're in favour as well. Is that correct?
I am, yes.
Yes. Councillor Northcott.
Permit.
Councillor Moffat.
A cautious permit.
Councillor Maxfield.
Permit.
That item is clearly passed. I think, given what I've heard this evening, I would certainly ask our legal team to look very carefully at how this is going to be managed. We do want to make sure that those leases come to an end by the stated time. On that point, we can move on to our next item, rather sad item, in fact, item 8, to do with BETLEY Court. You see the recommendation. Again, I think there is a supplementary to this in front of you. Just ask our officer if there's anything further to add at this juncture.
No, nothing further.
Again, I then open the item for comment from members. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible for officers to elaborate on why we are not considering the recommendation of our own officer and that of Heritage England to require the use of Westmoreland slate on the elevation only that faces the main road. I appreciate that the materials being used in less visible locations are something to be conceded. But if the options that are available to us include a locally, i.e. United Kingdom sourced material, and a material that seems to me to have larger overheads and a longer lead-in time that has to be imported from elsewhere. Is there something that I am missing on which our officer has based that recommendation?
Well, the applicant was proposing Welsh slates across the entire roof. All the different slopes of the roof, and it's quite a complex roof, as you can imagine, and which wasn't acceptable to either our own conservation officer or to Heritage England. Their preference was for the Westmoreland slate, which is a green slate, quite a textured slate, because there was evidence that was a material that was used on the roof prior to it being damaged and disappearing due to fire. But the applicant was concerned about the additional costs and the lead-in time for sourcing that material. So they came back with the suggestion that for instead of Westmoreland, using Vermont green slate, which is quite similar in appearance to the Westmoreland slate. And whilst we haven't got written confirmation from either the Conservation Officer or Heritage England, I can confirm that the Conservation Officer is happy with the use of the Vermont slate. It isn't one that's quarried in this country, but apparently it is one that was used even at the time that the roof was constructed. So there is some heritage merit to using that slate, and the use of the slate, the Vermont slate, was shared with Heritage England or Historic England, and they didn't come back to say that was unacceptable. So it was a compromise that was considered to be appropriate, which is why the recommendation specifies that in addition to Welsh slate, Vermont green slate is to be used on all forward facing slopes. So those are to the road and to the main garden area.
Any further comment from members? From my own perspective, the important thing here is to try and make sure that renovation of this structure goes ahead as quickly as possible. The few times I've been past it, it looks in a very parlous state, and I would not wish to see it collapse. So I think the more we can help its restoration, the better at the end of the day. I take the councillor's point. It would be nice in some respects to have a British supplier here, but my understanding is in fact that the stuff from the States will come that bit faster. Which is a great shame, but there you are. Councillor Holland.
I accept that explanation and that view. I know that the parish and the wider community are also supportive of the application as it stands. So with the change that was made prior to the report coming forward to Vermont slate for the relevant elevations, those parts of the roof, I would be minded to support and to wish them every success with the restoration of the building.
Councillor Jones, I think, wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Agreeing with Councillor Holland that I would have liked to have seen our mighty and beautiful Welsh slate across the whole of the roof, but that's not to be, and we'll be giving in to the New England green slate across the front, and despondent in the time it takes for us to quarry our wonderful slate. I think perhaps I need to speak to my countrymen and get them to speed up the process so we can have more of it across the buildings in the borough. On the basis that Councillor Holland, I presume, has just proposed the recommendation, I would second that recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Northcott.
Councillor Jones, you just speak me to the thunder, but he may wish to add that if he's going to make a suggestion to his national man, that they may be more negotiable in terms of price, I believe. because that's a major consideration with this. So yes, listening to the parish council and also the parish that's on my patch, and as a county councillor, we've gone into this quite extensively over the last few months, particularly with this on the horizon, and I have no qualms whatsoever in supporting this recommendation that we approve this, and all speed ahead. Thank you.
Any further comment from members? Again, then I'll take a vote by roll call. Councillor Owen.
Permit.
Councillor Holland.
In favour.
Councillor Reddish.
Permit.
Councillor Cooper.
In favour.
Councillor Jones.
Permit.
Councillor Burgess.
In favour.
Councillor Mrs Williams.
Permit.
Councillor Williams.
Permit.
Councillor Northcott.
Permit.
Councillor Moffat.
In favour.
Councillor Maxfield.
In favour.
That item clearly passes, and we can move to an associated application, item 9, which again you can see is about Betley Court. And again, I'll just ask our officer if there's anything further to add at this point in time.
No, nothing further. Thank you.
Again, I open this item for comment. Councillor Northcott.
I propose that we accept this formally.
I'm happy to second that from the chair. Is there any further comment from members? Then again, I'll take a vote by roll call. Councillor Owen.
Permit.
Councillor Holland.
In favour.
Councillor Reddish.
Permit.
Councillor Cooper.
In favour.
Councillor Jones.
In favour.
Councillor Burgess.
Permit.
Councillor Mrs Williams.
Permit.
Councillor Williams.
Permit.
Councillor Northcott.
Permit.
Councillor Moffat.
In favour.
Councillor Maxfield.
In favour.
That item therefore clearly passes, and we can progress to our next item, item 10 on the agenda. I can find it. So, application at Brookhouse Farm, Newcastle Road, Madeley. And again, I'll just ask our officer if we've got anything to add at this particular point in time.
Nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you.
From the chair, could I just ask if we've got any diagrams of this building? Because as I understand it, is substantially larger than the building on site, and it would be useful, I think, for members to have sight of it.
Yes, Chair. Just bear with me.
I'd rather give up on it, to be honest. I think we're going to stick with the the monitor again, nothing much seems to be happening. So if our officer could just speak to the diagram on the monitor and perhaps also take us through the fabric that's proposed at this juncture.
Yeah, so obviously the proposed building is shown on the screen. It's in terms of its footprint, it's only marginally larger than the existing buildings on the site, which are dated and no longer fit for purpose. The applicant explains that due to modern agricultural machinery nowadays and the size of that the current buildings won't allow those to be repaired in the existing buildings. So that is the reason for the proposed building and the increased height, is that roller shutter doors will allow the larger machinery to be repaired inside the building, which obviously will provide benefits to the agricultural business. I have got some images of the materials that they're looking to construct the building out of. So if you just bear with me, I'll bring those up. So that is the obviously the building shown on the image is much smaller than the building that is being proposed, but the facing materials and the roller shutter doors is the finish that the applicant is looking to achieve from the proposed development. If members wish to see photographs of the existing site and existing buildings, then we do have those available. But the image that was shown is a similar type of finish to that which is the proposed building will be constructed from. Thank you.
If I just explore this a little bit more, when this building is constructed, will it be mainly looked down upon, or will it break a skyline in any way? Because that may affect the way we want to think about the colouring of the building.
Yeah, I think the views of the building will be interrupted by vegetation and existing buildings, but because of its height, I think, and the land is fairly flat around there, so I'm sure that much of the roof won't be visible. It'll be the external elevations which will be the prominent viewpoints from much of the surrounding area. Maybe the M6 may be slightly elevated, and you may have glimpses of the roof from the M6, but most certainly the wider landscape, residential properties, agricultural uses, it'll be the external elevations that will be the primary views.
Thank you very much. I invite comment from members. Councillor Cooper?
I can see there's quite a height difference in this building, as although the original footprint is more or less the same as the existing building. But I am minded to be in favour of this because, it's stating how machinery outside is a bit more of a blot on the landscape, really, and the explanation we've just had about how it may be visible from the wider area was quite reassuring. Thank you.
Councillor Holland, did you indicate a wish to speak, or am I just wrong? No, I was just wrong. Okay. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've seen this particular area through from the public footpath that is just farther along the road towards Madeley, and there's quite a few buildings and activities that go on in this backland of Newcastle Road. with small enclosures and small buildings with animals and goats and that type of small holdings. And I don't think, in my mind's eye, this will be intrusive to that particular area, because it's the backdrop of the motorway, and it's the building will be looking towards Madeley and lengthways. I don't think it will be any very intrusive in the area, and it's also will allow people to go about their business in a right and proper manner. So I go along with the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Northcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an established rural business of long-standing nature. Clearly, it's outgrown its present premises to make these buildings not fit for purpose to conduct its business. I've got no reservations at all. I'm quite satisfied that there's going to be no major impact, and it satisfies the special circumstances within the green belt for a rural business that potentially will keep employment in the local area. So I've got no hesitation in formally proposing this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any further comment from members? In that case, I propose again to go to a vote via roll call. So, Councillor Owen.
Permit.
Councillor Holland.
In favour.
Councillor Reddish.
Permit.
Councillor Cooper.
In favour.
Councillor Jones.
In favour.
Councillor Burgess.
In favour.
Councillor Mrs. Williams.
Permit.
Councillor Williams.
Permit.
Councillor Northcott.
Permit.
Councillor Morfitt.
In favour.
Councillor Maxfield.
In favour.
That item therefore clearly passes. We now move to a part of our agenda where I propose to take the next three items, which are reports of appeals, decisions of the council on block. As you can see, two of those appeals were dismissed. The first one was granted. I don't think that there's anything here which needs to be drawn as a special lesson. I look to our officers to see if they wish to comment on any of these particular items. And I look to members to comment if they wish to do so at this point. Councillor Holland.
Am I correct in thinking that the appeal that was allowed was a decision that was made by officers under delegated powers and not one that we saw at committee?
Yes, that's correct. It was a delegated decision by officers.
Looking around the room and looking at my screen, I don't see any particular eagerness for members to comment on these, and I propose that we simply accept this information. There's no need to take a vote on this particular item.
Agreed.
That allows us to progress to item 14, which is a consultation item about Chemical Lane in Tunstall. I look to our office to see if there's any further information to impart at this juncture.
No, nothing further.
And again, I now open the item for debate. Councillor Williams, do you wish to comment on this?
I haven't put it up, Mr. Chairman, but just to find out information, is it the old football field, the Johnson Tiles football field that we're talking about?
I'm sorry, I don't know. I could share a plan, but I don't know whether that is the building you're referring to or the site you're referring to.
Yeah, it's just the point is whether the city of, and when they build on a sport field, sporting, make sure that there's another piece of land that's provided for sporting activities. That was all, Chairman. But the city should will deal with that anyway. Thank you.
I think what we can do, Councillor, is if our officer checks the precise location after the meeting, and that is the case, we can append that comment to our general comments.
Thank you.
Any further comment from members? Again, I see none. Oh, Councillor Northcott, I beg your pardon.
Apologies, Chair. No, I haven't any comments to make.
In that case, our recommendation is that we have no objections. If we bear in mind what Councillor Williams has said, if in fact we don't have a problem there, I think we can leave that recommendation as is. Otherwise, perhaps we can make the comments that Councillor Williams made. Again, I see no reason to go through a roll call here, unless anyone particularly wishes to call for one. Are we happy with the recommendation as it's there printed?
Agreed. Yeah, yeah.
In that
Agreed.
case, let's move on to item. Is it 15? Yes, sorry, my electrical thing has slipped. That's I do apologise. We'll get there. Here we are. So this again is a consultation item, again in Tunstall, former 7 Trent Waterside, Harewood Street. Once again, I ask our officer if there's anything further to add to the report in front of us.
No, thank you.
And invite comment from members. Once again, I'm going to take silence as assent at this point. So are we happy with the recommendation?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
That case, we'll take that as printed. I'm unsure why, but at this point, my report runs out. So that's the end, our officer says. Well, I'm sure we should ask whether there is any urgent business as so defined in the relevant section of the relevant act. But since our officer says that's the end, I'm pretty much sure that is not the case. Therefore, I'd like to thank you for your attendance this evening. If you have to go home, have a safe journey home. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of the evening in the comfort of your home.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank